Some Nintendo Switch games launch with massive hype, flashy trailers, and endless buzz. And then there are the quieter ones. This list is all about 20 mid-tier Switch games that are way better than expected, the kind you casually try and end up thinking about non-stop. This is one of those games where you boot it up expecting something fine, and then suddenly you're hooked by the art, the combat, and the characters before you even realize what happened. Indivisible blends smooth platforming with a really distinctive active battle system, where combat happens seamlessly as you explore the world. Instead of random encounters, fights flow naturally, and each party member attacks in a different direction with specific timing, so battles feel fast, tactical, and surprisingly skill-based. The hand-drawn art is stunning, with every animation looking like it was pulled straight from a high-quality animated series. What really surprised me though was how character-focused the experience is. Your party constantly grows, not just in abilities, but in personality through dialogue, banter, and story moments that actually land emotionally. I expected a stylish indie RPG, but I didn't expect to get genuinely invested in its world and cast this quickly. Okay, real talk. I went into this thinking it was just a lazy nostalgia cash grab, and then I lost an entire evening micromanaging tiny digital theme park guests. RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic delivers the core experience of the first two legendary games, focusing on deep park management and coaster design without unnecessary fluff. You're carefully placing rides, managing staff schedules, setting prices, and trying to balance guest happiness with profit, all while designing increasingly ridiculous roller coasters piece by piece. What makes it surprisingly compelling is how much every decision matters. A poorly placed bathroom, an overpriced food stall, or a coaster that's slightly too intense can spiral into chaos fast. There's a constant sense of just one more adjustment, and suddenly hours disappear. It doesn't try to reinvent the formula, it just lets the classic systems shine. I expected a quick nostalgia hit, but instead got completely pulled back into that dangerously addictive management loop. This next one makes you feel like an unstoppable assassin, right up until it absolutely destroys you emotionally. Katana ZERO is built around lightning-fast, one-hit kill combat, where precision and timing are everything. You dash, slash, slow time, and rewind mistakes, turning every encounter into a deadly puzzle you're meant to solve perfectly. At first, it feels like a pure power fantasy, especially when you clear an entire room in seconds and watch it replay flawlessly. But beneath the stylish action is a dark, psychological narrative that slowly creeps in. The story explores memory, control, and trauma in ways that feel unexpectedly heavy. Combined with the intense synth soundtrack and razor-sharp pacing, the game keeps you constantly on edge. I went in expecting a slick action title, but I wasn't ready for how hard the story hits, or how long its theme stayed with me after the credits rolled. If you've ever said, I'll just play for one in-game day, and then looked up 3 hours later, yeah, this game knows exactly what it's doing. Rune Factory 4 Special blends cozy life simulation with surprisingly deep action RPG systems. You're farming, fishing, crafting, and building relationships in town, but you're also diving into dungeons, fighting monsters, and upgrading gear constantly. What makes it stand out is how interconnected everything feels. Your farming stats directly improve combat abilities, cooking meals gives meaningful buffs, and even talking to villagers can unlock new events and storylines. The world feels alive in a way that pulls you in slowly but relentlessly. There's always something nudging you forward, a new crop to experiment with, a skill to level, or a dungeon floor you're just strong enough to tackle. I expected something relaxing, but I didn't expect how layered and time-consuming it would become once everything clicked. This game has one rule: don't touch the spinning discs, and somehow that's enough to completely ruin your confidence in about 10 seconds. Disc Room is built around tight, single-room challenges where survival is measured in seconds. You're dropped into small arenas filled with spinning, bouncing, tracking, and splitting discs, and one hit means instant death. What makes it so addictive is how readable yet overwhelming everything feels. Patterns are clear, but reacting to them under pressure is another story. Each room introduces new disc behaviors, forcing you to adapt constantly instead of relying on muscle memory alone. Progression comes through unlocking abilities like dashes or deflects, which add just enough complexity to keep things fresh. It's minimalistic but never shallow. I was shocked by how often I said one more try, even after failing dozens of times in a row. It's stressful, satisfying, and weirdly empowering when things finally click.
And remember, what kills you
At first glance, this looks like just another old-school JRPG port, but give it a little time and it quietly becomes one of the strongest RPGs on the system. Tales of Vesperia uses real-time action combat that blends fighting game-style movement with RPG strategy. You're controlling characters directly, chaining attacks, managing skills, and switching party members mid-battle to adapt to different enemies. What really elevates it, though, is the cast. The characters don't just exist to move the plot forward. They constantly interact through skits, conversations, and side moments that make them feel genuinely alive. The story takes its time, slowly expanding from personal conflicts into larger moral questions, which makes the journey feel earned instead of rushed. I went in expecting a competent, familiar JRPG experience, but I stayed because I actually cared about the characters and how their relationships evolved. It's the kind of game that grows on you the longer you play. If Mega Man, Sonic, and pure caffeine-fueled chaos had a baby, it might look something like this. Berserk Boy is a high-speed action platformer built entirely around momentum. You're constantly dashing, chaining attacks, and bouncing between enemies to keep your speed up, and the game actively rewards you for never slowing down. Combat and movement blend together, so every level feels like a playground designed for stylish flow rather than careful inch-by-inch progress. What really elevates it is the elemental transformation system, letting you switch powers mid-run to access new abilities, paths, and attack styles. The pixel art is vibrant, the animations are slick, and the soundtrack perfectly matches the game's non-stop energy. I went in expecting a fun indie platformer, but I didn't expect how addictive the movement would feel once it clicked. It's the kind of game where replaying levels isn't a chore, it's the goal. On paper, this game should not work. Fire Emblem, Shin Megami Tensei, and idol culture all mashed together, and yet, it absolutely does. Tokyo Mirage Sessions blends turn-based combat rooted in Shin Megami Tensei with flashy combo systems called Sessions, where exploiting enemy weaknesses triggers extended team attacks. Battles are fast, colorful, and surprisingly strategic, constantly encouraging smart party setup and skill planning. Outside of combat, the game leans fully into its modern Tokyo idol setting, following characters balancing everyday life with supernatural threats. What really surprised me is how sincere it all feels. The tone is unapologetically upbeat, but the character arcs have genuine growth and emotional payoff. I expected something awkward or gimmicky, but instead found a confident JRPG that fully commits to its identity. Once you accept its weirdness, it becomes charming, stylish, and way more engaging than its reputation suggests. This is one of those games that makes you smile first, and then sneakily makes you feel very clever. Carto is a puzzle adventure built around a deceptively simple idea, rearranging map pieces to reshape the world itself. By physically moving sections of the map, you change geography, open new paths, and solve environmental puzzles in ways that feel intuitive but deeply satisfying. There's no pressure, no combat-heavy stress, just thoughtful exploration and gentle problem solving. Each new area introduces fresh twists on the core mechanic, keeping things engaging without ever feeling overwhelming. The story is light and heartwarming, following Carto as she navigates unfamiliar lands and meets charming characters along the way. I expected a relaxing puzzle game, but I didn't expect how consistently smart the design would be. It's cozy, creative, and quietly rewarding in a way that sticks with you long after you stop playing. I thought I was good at platformers, and then this game immediately humbled me. Crash Bandicoot 4 takes the familiar formula and cranks everything up, especially the difficulty and level design. Stages are longer, denser, and packed with hazards that demand precision, timing, and patience. New mask abilities let you manipulate gravity, slow time, or phase objects in and out, adding puzzle-like layers to traditional platforming. What surprised me most is how unapologetically challenging it is. This isn't just about reaching the end of a level, it's about mastering it. Optional challenges, hidden paths, and collectible objectives turn each stage into a test of skill and persistence. I expected a nostalgic platformer with modern polish, but instead got something that feels confident enough to push players hard. It's demanding, sometimes brutal, but incredibly satisfying when everything finally clicks. If you've never controlled an army by chanting drum beats at your screen, honestly, you're missing out. Patapon blends rhythm gameplay with real-time strategy in a way no other series has ever really matched. You issue commands by tapping rhythmic patterns, guiding your army to march, attack, defend, or retreat in perfect sync. Staying on beat isn't just for style, it directly affects damage, morale, and overall success. Over time, you recruit different unit types, upgrade equipment, and customize your army to handle tougher challenges. What surprised me is how naturally the rhythm becomes second nature. Once it clicks, you're no longer thinking about inputs, you're just locked into the flow. The bold art style and infectious chants make every battle feel memorable. I expected a quirky rhythm game, but ended up with something deeply strategic, surprisingly intense, and completely unforgettable. This is the kind of game that doesn't shout for attention, but once it has you, it really has you. A Ranger is a puzzle-driven adventure where the world itself moves when you do. Instead of pushing blocks, you slide entire sections of the environment, shifting terrain, paths, and obstacles as interconnected pieces. Every movement matters, turning exploration into a constant spatial puzzle. Combat is minimal and thoughtfully integrated, keeping the focus on clever problem-solving rather than reflexes. What makes it special is how naturally the puzzles evolve. New mechanics are introduced slowly, then layered together in ways that gently challenge your understanding without overwhelming you. The story is quiet and introspective, giving the game a calm, almost meditative pace. I expected something simple and relaxing, but found myself stopping often just to think through solutions. It's subtle, smart, and surprisingly engaging once it pulls you in. This game does not care if you're comfortable, and that's exactly why it's so fascinating. Romancing Saga 2 throws out traditional JRPG structure in favor of a generational system where your choices shape the world across multiple rulers. Characters age, die, and pass their legacy on, while the story branches based on your decisions and failures. Combat is strategic and unforgiving, emphasizing formation, resource management, and learning enemy patterns through experience rather than tutorials. What really caught me off guard is how open it is. You're rarely told where to go next, and progress often comes from experimentation rather than clear objectives. It can feel intimidating at first, but that freedom is what makes it so rewarding. I expected an obscure retro RPG, but ended up appreciating how boldly different it feels. It challenges your habits and expectations in a way few games are willing to do.
Through your fate.
See ya!
At first, this looks like a simple retro throwback, and then you realize there's way more going on under the surface. Alwa's Legacy is a Metroidvania that mixes classic pixel art charm with surprisingly modern design choices. Instead of just finding upgrades in a set order, you're given freedom to develop abilities through a skill tree, letting you shape how you approach exploration and puzzles. Magic isn't just for combat, it's used constantly to manipulate platforms, activate switches, and solve environmental challenges. What surprised me most is how thoughtful the level design feels. Areas loop back on themselves in clever ways, rewarding curiosity without feeling confusing. The game encourages exploration at your own pace, rarely rushing you, but always giving you something interesting to uncover. I expected a straightforward retro-style adventure, but ended up appreciating how intentionally designed everything felt. It's familiar enough to feel cozy, yet fresh enough to stay engaging all the way through. I came for the cute art style, and stayed because I accidentally became a very efficient cult leader. Cult of the Lamb blends roguelike dungeon crawling with village management in a way that constantly feeds into itself. You head out on combat runs to gather resources, then return home to build structures, perform rituals, and manage the needs of your followers. What makes it surprisingly compelling is how those systems overlap. Your cult's strength directly affects your dungeon success, and your dungeon rewards shape how your cult evolves. Moral choices add an extra layer, forcing you to decide how far you're willing to go for efficiency. The contrast between adorable visuals and dark themes is intentional and oddly charming. I expected a fun gimmick, but didn't expect how addictive the management loop would become. Before I knew it, I was planning rituals and upgrades like it was second nature.
Your flock grow your power and spread the word of...
Don't let the adorable art fool you. This game is absolutely ruthless. Wildfrost is a roguelike deck builder that constantly forces you to think several turns ahead. Every card has a countdown timer, meaning attacks, abilities, and effects trigger automatically unless you reposition units strategically. That single twist changes everything, turning each battle into a tense puzzle where poor placement can spiral into disaster fast. Between runs, you unlock new cards, charms, and companions, gradually expanding your options while the difficulty never really lets up. What caught me off guard is how punishing it can be while still feeling fair. Losses almost always feel like your fault, not the game's. I expected something light and cozy based on the visuals, but instead found a deeply tactical experience that rewards careful planning and adaptability. It's charming on the surface, but merciless once the cards are down. This game asked a very important question. What if dodgeball was treated like the most serious sport on Earth? Dodgeball Academia turns dodgeball into a full RPG experience, complete with story arcs, rival teams, and special abilities. Matches play out in real time, requiring quick movement, precise throws, and smart use of superpowered shots. Between games, you're exploring a school campus, upgrading stats, learning new moves, and interacting with classmates who feel like characters from a Saturday morning cartoon. What surprised me is how well the RPG structure supports the sport. Progression feels meaningful, and battles become more tactical as you unlock team synergies and abilities. I went in expecting a lighthearted sports game, but found something far more involved than I anticipated. It takes its silly premise seriously enough to make every match feel exciting, competitive, and genuinely fun. This one feels less like a game you play and more like a game you experience. Kunitsu-Gami blends real-time action with strategic decision-making in a way that constantly keeps your brain engaged. During the day, you purify corrupted villages and position units to defend key paths, choosing where each role fits best. At night, everything shifts into intense action as waves of enemies attack, and you jump directly into combat to protect the goddess at the center of it all. What really surprised me is how smoothly the strategy and action flow together. You're not just reacting, you're executing a plan you set up earlier. The visual style draws heavily from Japanese folklore, making every area feel deliberate and striking. I expected something stylish and experimental, but didn't expect how focused and thoughtful the gameplay loop would feel once everything clicked. I still remember the moment I realized this game was running really well on Switch, and my jaw actually dropped. Sniper Elite 4 is built around methodical, open-ended stealth gameplay that rewards patience and planning. Instead of funneling you down narrow paths, missions drop you into large maps with multiple objectives and tons of freedom in how you approach them. You're lining up long-distance shots, accounting for bullet drop and wind, while also sneaking through enemy patrols and setting traps when things get messy. The signature X-ray kill cam is still here, but what really surprised me was how smart the overall design is. You're constantly weighing risk versus reward, deciding whether to stay hidden or improvise on the fly. I expected a straightforward shooter experience, but ended up spending way more time scouting environments and thinking tactically than I ever anticipated. I never thought I'd say this, but this game made me genuinely care about how well my rice was growing. Sakuna of Rice and Rune ties its entire progression system to rice cultivation, and it commits to that idea completely. Farming isn't a side activity, it directly determines your character's strength, stats, and combat effectiveness. You're tilling soil, managing water levels, choosing fertilizers, and harvesting crops with surprising detail. Outside of farming, the game shifts into side-scrolling action combat, where Sakuna uses farming tools as weapons against monsters. What caught me off guard is how meaningful that balance feels. Every successful harvest makes combat feel better, and every tough fight pushes you to farm smarter. I expected a quirky hybrid, but ended up appreciating how deeply connected its systems are. It's methodical, rewarding, and far more thoughtful than it first appears.
So, Lady Sakuna, what should we do now?
Nintendo's library is packed with hidden surprises, and these games prove you don't need massive hype to deliver something special. Let me know which one shocked you the most, and hit subscribe if you've ever just tried a game and lost an entire weekend.